in the month of April, where we try to do a series of events celebrating disability and talking about disability. I'm just going to give a few notes about accessibility, and then Abby and Shelby are going to say a few words, and then we'll introduce Dominic Evans. There's wheelchair accessible bathrooms that are just across the hallway from us. We've made this scent-free space, so if you do have any heavy scent, we appreciate it coming off. Please feel free to approach myself, Abby, or Shelby here if you have any access needs. All right, and also, of course, we have the cart captioning in the corner there for deaf and hard of hearing people. All right, let you go, Shelby.
Okay. Okay, so just quick note, there's these little flyers in the back that have a list of all the D-Month events coming up, so grab one of those if you want to stay informed. And then we also have a little raffle going back there. Gay City's Lush Us event is at the end of April, and they gave us some tickets to give out to everybody, so if you're interested, just put your name in the raffle and we'll raffle it off towards the end of the event.
I just have a quick little thing. I'm going to be taking pictures, so if you don't want any of those on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anything like that, just come see me at the end and I'll delete the ones of you. But let me know before you go, otherwise they might go up somewhere.
Cool. Oh, you should turn it. Yeah, turn the computer. Right now.
Okay, we're just going to turn the computer so you can see everyone here, Dominic.
Okay, great.
Sure. Is that better?
There we go.
All right, so I am going to introduce our speaker today, Dominic Evans. Dominic Evans is a filmmaker and an activist in disability and LGBTQIA realms. He is made 2 films, Trip and Nancy and Sydney, and he's the founder of Film Dis, which is a media monitoring company, a nonprofit that looks at representation of disability in film and television. We're really excited to have Dominic here from Ohio. We'd love to have him in person, but having him on the screen is almost just as good. So thank you so much, Dominic.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I really wish that I could be there in person, but you know, wheelchair circumstances made it impossible, but I'm hoping that I can get up that way later in the year and see all of you in person. I'm also really grateful and glad that I have been given the opportunity to present on a topic that is very close to my heart. My heart is in film. It's my passion. I've wanted to be involved in film since I was a very small child in some capacity. So when I started becoming aware of my disabled identity, at the same time as I was forming my identity as a filmmaker, you know, these 2 things kind of merged to where my passion became activism surrounding disability in media, particularly film and television, but really, you know, just all forms of media. The more I delved into the topic and the more I became involved in film, the more I saw the disparities for the disability community. And I'm not the type of person who can ever keep quiet about something if I believe that it's wrong. So I studied as much as I could, educated myself as much as I could on this topic because it was important to me and it's important to the disability community. I feel like the media is where the entire world gets information about the disability community. So it's imperative that our media represents us accurately, it represents us fairly, and it allows us to be involved in the process of creating that media. So I would like to present to you on this topic. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint to kind of guide the discussion, and I will come back to you now and then so you can see me as well. pull up the PowerPoint for me, please.
Okay.
Okay, are we screen sharing?
Hold on, it's not reading the PowerPoint. Okay, now we go.
Was it screen?
No,
you
it
see
wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't showing the PowerPoint. I was getting it to show the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay, there's the
Okay,
PowerPoint.
can you guys see the screen?
Mhm.
Okay, put it on slideshow.
And there we go.
Okay, I'm presenting on mimicry, depictions, and intersectionality, disability in film. And I threw in a little television too, because through my studies, I found that the lack of representation in television kind of parallels the lack of representation and inclusion in film. So the statistics hold true for both of them. We're equally excluded. Okay, so next slide. Just click up there. Okay, so you got a little introduction of who I am, thanks to the wonderful staff at the D Center. I am a filmmaker. I received my Bachelor of Fine Arts in motion picture production. I also did a lot of study in film theory, because you have to have as many theory classes to be a production major. So, and that's really where my interest in disability inclusion stems from. I decided to pursue the topic in an independent study for one of my theory credits, and that was how I realized that this was an issue, because I was finding all these examples of problematic films and problematic portrayals, and I was realizing that.
Sorry to interrupt, Dominic, but we can't quite see this PowerPoint. It's just
It's not going on the stream. It cut off the screen share.
Oh, okay, hang on 1 second. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
Okay,
Let's see.
go to escape, press escape. There you
Okay,
go.
so let's see. It might be my setting thing. Because I don't know. I never really thought about that.
Robert, it should be in the Hangouts.
Oh,
They're saying it's not showing for them either.
it just wasn't moving to the next slide.
Oh, it's not moving? Can you see the next slide now?
Yeah.
Okay, let me know if it doesn't go to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, I think it's because of a full screen thing.
Oh.
It could have been it was in full screen and it wasn't picking that up. So it wasn't moving
Okay.
to the next slide. Maybe there's a way I can window it so it still does it.
No, do it. You have to do it in full screen.
Okay.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. Just want to make sure everybody can.
That was the wrong one. And,
Okay.
Okay.
Can you see that now? Does it say introduction? Who am I?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It was through my studies that I realized this was an issue, because I was taking theory classes. So I really kind of owe it to my degree, even though I haven't really had the opportunity to make a lot of films like I wanted to. I've been able to use my degree through the theory aspect to pursue portrayals and inclusion of disabled people in media, particularly film and television. I also recently started a nonprofit, Film Dis. It evolved out of the hashtag some of you might be aware of, Film Dis on Twitter, where we discuss every Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We discuss a topic relating to disability in media. And I saw that there was a hole in the community that needed to be filled for a nonprofit organization to monitor media, call out media, tell them they need to do better and they need to include us. So that is our priority. And we have a great board of amazing disability activists that I can't wait to reveal later this month when we let the world know about what our organization is going to be doing. So I'm a disability and LGBTQIA activist. I am a trans man. I'm queer. And obviously I'm disabled. I'm not just sitting in this wheelchair for my looks, you know. And I also work for the Center for Disability Rights as a media and entertainment advocate, which means everything we do revolves around institutional bias. So we just recently had films submitted for a film festival we're having on films that feature institutional bias and why it's a problem that disabled people are institutionalized. Because obviously there's not a lot of media even exploring that topic. And finally, like I've been saying from the beginning, I'm fighting for representation and inclusion and better portrayals of disability in films. So, next slide, please. So when we say disability in media, most people think film and television. That's where my interest started, but that's because I was studying film. I wanted to be on film or television before I decided I wanted to be the one bossing everybody around on film and television. But the more I delved into what media was, I realized that the same problems were happening in other forms of media. We don't see inclusion in video game characters. We don't see inclusion in web-based media, although I have to say of all the medias, web-based has been the greatest for inclusion because it's cheaper to make web-based content, and a lot of times investors aren't willing to give disabled creators opportunities. So a lot of us are relying on, low income. Some of us are on disability. That's not a lot of income to make a film. But web-based media has allowed people to make things for free or for cheap or for, I'll trade you this skill. I'll direct and you are a cinematographer, we'll trade our skills. And it's allowed disabled creators to create their own work. So while it's not universally inclusive, it's definitely better than film, television, and all the other forms of media we're going to discuss.
Sorry, Dominic, I'm gonna have to interrupt. The slides aren't showing, but I'm thinking maybe we should just see you instead of the slides, so we don't have to worry about it.
Okay. Robert, just press the escape then. Sorry about that. Okay,
Okay,
on
fix
the
the
screen
camera.
share. Okay, pull the slides up for me so I can follow them.
Okay.
Okay. So we're also talking about comics.
Let me see if I can.
It's fine, Robert. I don't have to see.
Zoom.
It's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So we're also talking about comics, literature, Broadway, any of the performing arts or the visual arts or even the textual-based arts. Those are not including disabled creators, disabled actors, disabled crew members. Disabled people just aren't anywhere in these media communities. They're nowhere. So the disability community has had this battle cry for years. And when I heard it the first time, it was so empowering. It was the most empowering thing I've heard in a long time. It said nothing about us without us. And that's kind of been my battle cry in fighting for inclusion in media. Media should not be created without disabled people. We need to be creating, we need to be acting. We need to be having opportunities to do sound and lighting and all the other things that we could help with. People underestimate disabled people continuously. And, that's why we're not included. That to me is the number one reason. People don't think we can do it. There's a lot of other reasons, and we'll discuss those reasons tonight. But most of it is that media controls what people think about disability. The media's not right. We're not included in the creation of it, so it's not going to get better. So it's this catch-22. We're not involved in the creation, but the creation is shaped by what the media sees. If the media is not right, what they're seeing is not right, so they're not going to include us. So we're trying to educate them, the media, help them see that their perception of disability isn't right, that they need to include us. Disabled people are routinely excluded from casting, from being on a set. We're excluded from CGI. They will CGI a person to make them disabled, but they were not CGI a disabled person to make them not disabled. Say if they wanted to do an origin scene where a person was not disabled, they won't CGI the character. They have the capability to do it, but they won't do it. They would rather let a non-disabled person play a disabled character than allow a disabled person to play themselves. So we are not included as crew. We are not included as creators. We are overwhelmingly not included. The portrayals about disability are often harmful. That's because, first, you cannot act disability. People always say, oh, it's just acting. But if you don't live with the experiences of a disabled person, being disabled doesn't define me, but it certainly affects everything I do in my life. It affects what I see when I go out to the grocery store, because I'm constantly aware of people that are staring at me, that are mocking me, that make rude comments, that, bypass me like I'm not even there and knock into my wheelchair or, mutter under their breath that I'm in their way. It affects everything I do. It affects the laws that get passed about disabled people. If it's not accurate, then it affects the disability community in many significant ways. That's why we need to be included, because we need to have accuracy, because it's just harm creating harm for us. You can't act disability because you don't understand that background, that perspective. A lot of disabled activists see being disabled as an identity. I certainly do. I'm really proud to be disabled because that means that, there's things about me that I do differently than other people, and that's it. I still manage to get the job done. I just do it a different way, and if you don't experience that, you can't act that. They always turn to physical characteristics to define disability. And being disabled, we're not just physical movements. We're human beings. We're complex, individual people. And that's not portrayed. That is not what we see when we see disabled characters in media. We also aren't, can you move that up, please? I can't see this.
As far as it'll go unless I
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. We aren't being allowed. The other problem is we aren't being allowed to write, direct, be crew members, be creators in any way of disabled media. That's why it is also harmful. if we are not there to tell our stories, the only way people know our stories are the perceptions they have about disability. And from my experience, I've watched thousands of films that feature disabled characters. And 95% of them do not get it right. They reduce disabled lives to one little sector of existence, our physical disability. And they make even the invisible disabilities, the non-physical disabilities, they give them physical characteristics. The autistic person, they rely on the physicality of what they think it means to be autistic. If you ask an autistic person what it means to be autistic, they will have an amazingly wonderful, complex answer about how it is a part of their identities for many of them. And how many of them are proud to be autistic. If you look to the media about what it says about autistic people, it looks at them from a physical standpoint. They're rocking, they're grabbing their hair and pulling it, they're making vocal sounds, it's all about what can be seen and heard. They're physically trying to act out disability. When a non-disabled actor is portraying a disabled character, that's what they see. But when a disabled actor is able to portray disability just is. It's just a part of them. They don't have to act. They can focus on acting as the character, not the disabled character, just the character. Next slide, please. So a few groups have done studies on disability in the media. The first one was USC's Annenberg Report. The Annenberg Report was done in 2016, or at least released in 2016. And it was called Inequality in 800 Popular Films Examining Portrayals of Gender, Race, Ethnicity, LGBT, and Disability from 2007 to 2015. So they looked at 800 popular films. For disability, this was their first year to include the disability community in their report. And the disability community, they only ended up looking at the 100 top grossing movies from 2015. So instead of looking at the whole 800, they only looked at 100, which is fine because it does show the disparities. But I imagine if they had looked at all 800, the gap would have been even more glaring than what they discovered. The Annenberg Report was done by Dr. Stacy L. Smith, Mark Chuetti, and Dr. Catherine Piper. It was part of the Media Diversity and Social Change Initiative. And it's the most comprehensive analysis of film and intersectionality to date. Next slide, please. The results of this study, not surprising to me, but many other people that have heard about it say they didn't know it was this bad. 2.4% of speaking or named characters in 100 films were disabled. This is the top 100 grossing films of 2015. 2.4% of speaking or named characters were disabled. 45 films failed to have even one disabled speaking character. That's almost half of those 100 films did not have one disabled speaking character. 33.3% were in action adventure films, 2% animated characters. Animation could easily include us. We could easily be included as voice actors. Why aren't we included? I don't know. 2% of animated characters, that's not even including us as speaking voices. That's just 2% of animated characters at all. In 100 films were disabled characters. 61% of portrayals were physical disabilities. 37.1% were mental cognitive disabilities. And 18% were communication-based disabilities. 19%, now this statistic, before I give it to you, this is the one that did shock me. Surprising, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. 19% of the characters that were disabled were women. 81% were male, 0 transgender. Not a single transgender. There is no one like me in film. Not a disabled, queer, trans person. I've never seen myself represented in film. Not anywhere. So, LGBTQ characters, none. So those men and women, well, if they had romantic relationships with, it's doubtful many did. They were all heterosexual. So no queer people at all. 71.7% of the characters were white. 28.3% an underrepresented race or ethnicity. So less than 30% were every other racial and race or ethnicity other than white. Not surprising to me, but sickening. The exclusion in the disability community is glaring. Oh, and that female statistic, the 19% female, they said that that set a new low for exclusion of women. Congratulations to the disability community, because the people representing us, Hollywood, they've set a new low for our community. Disabled women are more excluded, except for Black, and other people of color, disabled people, transgender disabled people, LGBT disabled people. None of them are included. But females set a new low. And only 2 of the characters were children. So it was usually disabled adults, and 40% were over the age of 40. I'm not over the age of 40 yet. I'm getting close, but not yet. But I'm not represented in age. I'm not represented in gender. I'm not represented in sexuality and my disability. I don't know very many power chair users in media. There needs to be more. Next. The next report is the Ruderman White Paper on Employment of Actors with Disabilities in Television. That was also released in 2016. It was written by Danny Woodburn and Christina Kopik. The Ruderman Family Foundation sponsored the white paper, and they used that ADA definition to define what disability is. What they found was that 95% of actors playing disabled roles were non-disabled. That meant only 5% of actors playing disabled roles were disabled. 2.2% of characters on TV and streaming were disabled. So it's pretty similar to the statistics of 2.4 for film, 2.2 for television, 2.4 for film. We're 20% of the population, 2% represented. The statistics, they're astounding. They're ridiculous. Something needs to change. Next slide. So the last report that I'm going to talk about is GLAAD. GLAAD, for those who may not know, represents the LGBT community. They're a media monitoring organization. And a few years ago, they started including disability because they realized that there was a disparity in the community, there was a gap there, and they wanted to help. And you know, GLAAD has been friendly to the disability community, and that's where this started. So we're included in their Where We Are on TV report. Excuse me. Excuse me a second. Oh, excuse me. Okay. The Where We Are on TV report was released in 2016. Excuse me again. This is the joy of having SMA. You never know when you're gonna have a coughing break. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so GLAAD used the ADA definition of disability. This is their 7th year including disability in their annual report. What they found was that Fox was the leading network with 5 regular disabled characters. 1.7 characters on television, 15 characters total for 2016 were disabled. So for the 2015-2016 year, 1.7 characters on television. They said that that was actually better than the last year when it was 0.8%. It's still only 15 characters. They have so many shows on television. When you look at Netflix and Amazon, and yet all of those counted, only 15 characters were regulars on any TV show. And of those numbers, only a few were actually disabled. Next slide, please. So that brings us to disabled mimicry. Disabled mimicry is commonly referred to as cripping up. This is when non-disabled characters play roles that are designated disabled. The reason why I refer to it as disabled mimicry is because mimicry relies on stereotyping and sometimes mocking. And I don't mean mocking necessarily as they're doing it on purpose, but it just by nature is mocking the institution of what they're doing. So they may not intend to be mocking, but they are. And it seems to fit with what I know and see of these portrayals. There has been a long history of disabled mimicry. We can date it back to early silent films like Frankenstein, where Frankenstein's monster is seen as this monstrosity, this deformity. You know, in the 1910 portrayal, you know, it's this monstrosity that has no brain. They're disabled mentally. They don't have coordination. They're disabled in physical ways, and they're quote unquote deformed. And so this is where we first see this idea that disability is frightening. Disability makes you different. You're something to be feared. You're less than a man. These were all these messages that Frankenstein was sending about disability. And we saw it in 1923 with The Hunchback of Notre Dame, where Lon Chaney played a deaf, blind, and deformed hunchback. We saw, him creeping up in this role, this monstrosity. In many of these films, these monsters had to be killed. And for a long time, we continue to see this too. There's this stereotype that disabled characters have to be killed. They are killed in alarming numbers. We are killed because, it's not just, in some cases, they had to murder the evil, disabled, disfigured person. They did it to albinos a lot, even as far back as, the 1970s, we saw many films, making a mockery of albino people or of little people and, making them evil characters because of the way they looked, because of their disabilities. So this mimicry comes with these portrayals that are horrifying about disability. So we also saw it in films like 1931's The Miracle Woman with Barbara Stanwyck and David Manners, where this man was blind and, he was, inspirational for all of them because, he's this blind person and everybody should, be kind to him because he's less than. And the Miracle Woman was going to heal him because he needed to be saved. He needed to be healed. But she was a con woman. She couldn't heal him. So, just the ideas about disability representation that we're seeing here. Disability is inspiring. Disability is something to be mocked. Disabled people are, special or evil or monstrous, and we should all end up dead. That is what disabled mimicry has led to, because all of these portrayals were by, Lon Chaney, David Manners. These are not disabled people. So they could not correct this. They could not say, hey, disabled people die just like everybody else. But it's not this horrible, horrific thing. But that's what the films started telling about disability. And sadly, they have not gotten much better in the century since this has happened. Next slide, please. Notable examples. Now, I wish you could see these slides because there's 3 sets of slides just because I want you to see how big of a problem this is. And I'm just going to explain a couple of these examples because, it's a huge problem. 95% of characters in the Ruderman report looked at, 95% were non-disabled characters, non-disabled people playing disabled characters. It's a humongous problem. We're not included. So we have Jimmy Stewart in Rear Window. That was in 1954. And I love Hitchcock, but this film is ridiculous. Everything about it is ridiculous. If you've seen it, I heard some people laughing. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, he breaks both of his legs and he's using a wheelchair and he's spying on his neighbor who he believes murdered a woman. And so the more he becomes convinced that this guy has, murdered this woman, and he's, become reclusive because, breaking both your legs and being disabled temporarily is a tragedy. We have to stay in our houses and hide. We can't go out in public. So he stays in his house. He's a creepy stalker, and we're supposed to sympathize with a creepy stalker, temporarily disabled person. So, and there's a moment where his arms are not broken. There's nothing wrong with his arms. And he's literally wheeling his wheelchair to try to get away. And it's like his arms are disabled too. It's just ridiculous. You broke your legs, your arms, there's nothing wrong with your arms. So just his portrayal of disability, it's so horrible, so horrible. Jane Wyman for Magnificent Obsession in 1954. Deborah Kerr for An Affair to Remember in 1957. That film did have one good thing in that we saw romance and that people can look past disability for romance, but the entire idea that she became disabled and had self-pity and self-hate and could not go out in public again, that's a really tired trope we see over and over in films. Joanne Woodward was in The Three Faces of Eve in 1958. That was about someone who had multiple personalities. And, she had three faces. And it was not a very good portrayal. Not a lot. At the time, I don't even think they knew as much as they know now about dissociative identity disorder. And it's just horribly stereotypical. Everything, I can't even put into words just how bad these portrayals are. She just portrays a person as though, it's almost mocking the fact that a person dissociates, and it's embedded with stereotypes about DID. We also see that in Cliff Robertson's portrayal in Charlie in 1968. I don't know if you've seen Charlie. I had to watch it for school, and it didn't help because at the time I used to be raised in the neuromuscular disability community. If you know anything about that community, you know that we're the people that are called quote unquote Jerry's kids. And I personified that for a long time because the only message I had was that I needed to be cured, I needed to be fixed. And then I went to college and everything changed, and I realized that I was actually a human being and I did not need to be cured, that I'm fine as I am. But seeing Charlie after, before that time when I was self-pitying and had a lot of internalized ableism, it just reinforced those stereotypes. Because Charlie was a person with an intellectual disability, and he and some type of cognitive disability. I'm not sure they said what exactly he had, what exactly his disability was, but he was just portrayed as cognitively disabled, to where he worked at a job, but people would make fun of him. And so he decided, or someone decided for him, to give him treatments, quote unquote, to make him smarter. And he became a genius. But he realized that, he became not a very nice person to be around when he was a genius. And then the treatments regressed. and he was going to forget everything he learned. But then it became a very sad tragedy about all he was learning and the horror of learning so much and then losing it. So the idea that disability is something that you lose and it's something that you should mourn, that was an idea that was reinforced throughout my childhood. Seeing a film that portrayed that had a very huge impact on my own self-identity as a disabled person. That's why disabled mimicry is harmful. That's another reason why, because disabled young people need examples of disability that are reflective of accurate, true disabled lives. I think a lot of people would be less afraid of becoming disabled if they saw accurate portrayals of disability. If they saw disabled people doing things that people assume we cannot do. Another example of that is Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man in 1988. And all I have to say is ask any autistic person what they think of Rain Man. That's all you need. You just need to ask. It's a horrible portrayal of autistic people. And the person it's based on was not even autistic. But if you, my son is autistic, and do you know the first question he gets asked or I get asked about him being autistic? Oh, you mean like Rain Man? No, not like Rain Man. Nothing like Rain Man at all. And or they ask him, oh, can you tell me how many marbles are in this case? No, not like Rain Man. That film has done more harm to understanding what autistic people go through or who autistic people are than any film I've seen, just because everybody looks to that as the default of what it means to be autistic. Next slide, please. Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot in 1992. And I know some disabled people will disagree with this, but I'm not a fan. You know, I know they'll say he was so committed, he almost disabled himself by sitting in his wheelchair all the time. Daniel Day-Lewis is a great actor, but he relied on harmful tropes and stereotyping. His portrayal of disability was physical. And while it is one of the better stories on disability, it could have been portrayed so much better if the person portraying Christy Brown had actually been disabled. The next film is a film I hate. I absolutely hate it. We had a choice to do this film or another film, a scene from it, for an exercise in my film class, and I refused to do this film out of principle because it is the worst. Okay, I hate saying it's the worst portrayal of disability because almost all of them are the worst portrayals, but it's really bad. The film is Passion Fish from 1992 with Mary McDonnell, and she's a soap opera actress. She gets in a car accident. Her life is over. She can't be an actress anymore. She becomes an alcoholic, and she whines for the whole movie about poor her, blah, blah, blah. And then she has the Black woman savior trope come in Alfre Woodard, who saves the poor white person and makes things better for the white woman. It's full of horrible tropes on race. It's full of horrible tropes on disability. It's a horrible film. I just do not like it at all. Tom Hanks, Forrest Gump, 1994. I guess I make excuses for Forrest Gump because it is so unrealistic. I'm sorry, but you can't run and your leg braces will fall off. You cannot be a ping pong champion, who is a war hero, who runs like for, I'm sorry, he's just the portrayal is what we call the super crypt portrayal. He's not a realistic human being at all. So I kind of see Forrest Gump as a fantasy movie, not a drama. So when I look at it as a fantasy film where it's, obviously fiction, this could not be a real human being, it's kind of a funny film. But otherwise, no, it's a horrible portrayal of actual disability. Jude Law in Gattaca is a really interesting example. It was filmed in 1997, and I really like the film Gattaca. I think it would be interesting to have his character be a disabled character, because the world of Gattaca, if you don't know about it, it's about a world where they create these designer babies. You can create valid children. That's what they're called, valids. The invalid children are the ones that were created without help of, IVF or whatever the technology is they use in the film to create these designer children. If you just have children the old-fashioned way, which is, you have children the old-fashioned way, they're invalid. They know everything that can go wrong with them. From the time they're born, they say they can have a heart attack. They say they'll only live for 30 years, and they're treated as subhuman people. So it kind of turns the message about what it means to be disabled and non-disabled upside down, because an invalid person proves that he's just as capable as everyone else. So while there is cripping up, there is mimicry, and Jude Law portraying a valid person who gets in an accident and becomes actually disabled. The fact that Jude Law cripped up for that role, it could have been a really great film, a really great opportunity for a disabled actor who used a manual wheelchair. So another example is almost the entire cast of Girl Interrupted: Angelina Jolie, Winona Ryder, Elizabeth Moss, Brittany Murphy, Clea Duvall. All of them portrayed women with psychosocial disabilities. They were in a mental institution, and all of their performances were embedded in mimicry. They were relying on physically stereotyping. We commonly see psychosocial disabilities being portrayed with physical characteristics. They physically act out having, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, episodes that relate to their disability. It's not a nuanced performance of a human being. It's a mockery of what it means to have a psychosocial disability. Denzel Washington in The Bone Collector is another example in 1999. And it's really interesting because I don't know if you're noticing a trend, but most of the characters I've listed were men. Most of the characters I listed have been white. Denzel Washington had a role that could have been another disabled character. It wouldn't have required a disabled person to do anything out of the ordinary. There wouldn't have had to really be CGI. This story could have been told in a way that a disabled actor could have, been given the chance. And there are not a lot of Black disabled actors who are being given chances to act in these roles. It's even a bigger disparity than for white disabled male actors, or white disabled actors at all. Sean Penn, another example of disabled mimicry. He was in I Am Sam in 2001. Next slide, please. He played a man who had cognitive disabilities, who was fighting for his daughter. Again, and the funny thing is, they cast actually disabled people as his friends, but they wouldn't cast an actual disabled actor as Sam. A character, it would have been a great story if it had a disabled actor, because it was a story about a father fighting for his young daughter, fighting to prove that he was capable. That's a fight that disabled parents fight every single day, fighting to prove that they're capable of being parents. And think about what an amazing opportunity that would be for an actor with a cognitive disability to play that role. But disabled actors weren't given the opportunity to even audition. It was given to Sean Penn because he's a named actor and because disabled actors aren't even thought about. In 2002, Selma Hayek played Frida, based on the life of Frida Kahlo. And again, this is a rare opportunity for a disabled woman of color. Disabled women of color and disabled trans people of color, they are the most underrepresented of all groups. All disabled groups, they do not get media representation. I have to tell you, I really have to think hard. I've seen a lot of films, and I really have to think hard of any examples where actually disabled women of color or trans women or trans people of color have been in roles in any form of media. They're just not there. That's why it's just as bad that Jamie Foxx played Ray. He played Ray Charles, a real actual person that is blind. I'm pretty sure, I hope that I'm not so old that the people in this room do not know who Ray Charles is. But I'm only 36, so that could be really old to you or really young. I don't know. I'm just not sure. But anyway, Ray Charles, what a great opportunity. What a great character. Although I do understand on that level, Jamie Foxx does have a great voice, but if they had auditioned disabled, blind, Black men, who knows? One of them could have been an amazing singer. The problem is they didn't get the chance to audition. In every case I've listed, disabled people were not considered for the roles. These were given mostly to named actors that were non-disabled or that don't, I want to put a disclaimer on that. We don't know if they have an invisible disability, they don't have the disability, or have not disclosed having the disability that they were portraying. We can know that they don't have physical disabilities. It's harder to know if they don't disclose. Another huge problem in Hollywood, disabled actors are told if they disclose, if they have to disclose, or if they choose to disclose, they're most likely going to lose the opportunity to have a career. I can't tell you how many disabled actors have told me this story. They're afraid to come out and say they're disabled. And it's because they're already not getting roles. They want what little inclusion they have. They have to watch everything they do. I've watched friends have surgery, get hurt, be down for a few months with an illness, and then they go back to try and get jobs, and they're disabled and nobody will give them a chance at casting at all. It's a horrible problem. And these examples of mimicry make the problem even worse, because a lot of these characters have also received awards for their roles. And the problem with that is that if you're rewarding it, you're saying it's okay. And it's not okay. That's the problem. It's not okay, and not enough is being done to stop it. And one of the worst examples, and I do stand by this as one of the worst examples, is Eddie Redmayne in The Theory of Everything, 2014. I'm showing you a clip tonight. I hope you can see it because
There might be a way they can do it.
Okay.
Thing.
I really hope that you can see the clip because Eddie Redmayne as Stephen Hawking, I can't even put into words how mad this portrayal makes me. It makes me so mad because everything about it is wrong. And somebody raised a good question. They said, well, Stephen Hawking says it's okay and it's about him. But to me, disabled portrayals aren't just about that person. Sadly, disabled portrayals affect all disabled people. Assumptions are made about all disabled people. And I'm kind of disappointed that he liked it because they changed the ending. The true story is that he left his wife. He left his wife. The ending they gave, The Theory of Everything, I'm sorry if you haven't seen it. It's been out a couple years. Close your ears if you don't want to hear. But the way they changed it is they made his wife, he set her free. Because she was with him for so long, he said, I'll set you free so you can have a life that you deserve, a life without me. The implication was he's so disabled, he feels bad for his wife. The dude left his wife for another woman. And that's what they changed it to. Yeah, I'm sure he loved it because instead of making him look like a dog, you know, and I don't know if he's a dog or a dog, you know, but instead of, you know, making him that, no, they made him an object of pity. I don't know. I personally would rather be the dog. You know, I'd rather be like, yeah, I left her for, you know, that other girl over there. You know, of course I would. But, you know, no. Instead, he's an object of pity. Worst portrayal I've listed, except for Hilary Swank, the repeat offender. There are 2 repeat offenders on this list. Hilary Swank is one of them. She keeps playing disabled people. I swear, her next portrayal is going to be a disabled person portraying a non-disabled person portraying a disabled person. Or else a transgender person who's also disabled who might be Black, but you're not sure. Because I don't know what else she can do. She was in You're Not You, where she had ALS. And I don't know why she does this to our community. Because every time she does it, her portrayals, they just get worse. It's like she doesn't listen to the disability community. We protested her. We protested her with $1 Million Baby. She didn't listen. She didn't pay attention. She came back for the Homesman in 2014, and You're Not You in 2014. 2017 or 2018, I don't know what's going to be next, but I'm kind of scared because she's on number 3. What's number 4 going to be? The other repeat offender is James McAvoy. He also has 3 films, sort of. One's a series of films, so he's done more than 1 film. That's X-Men. He's Charles Xavier, and he's, in part of it, they let him walk. Because, hey, he wanted to be healed. Yay, it's so bad to be in a wheelchair. Blah, blah, blah. We've heard that message over and over again. He was in X-Men First Class, and he's been in all of the films since then as Charles Xavier, younger Charles Xavier. So he started his illustrious career cripping up in Rory O'Shea Was Here. And what do we know about Rory O'Shea? I'm sorry if I'm ruining the ending again. It's been out for like 13 or 14 years. So if you haven't seen it, well, you're not really missing that much, because Rory dies. He's another one of our characters that reinforces the message. 2004 was still reinforcing the message that it is better to be dead than disabled. And no one personifies that notion better than the last most notable example of disabled mimicry. And I hope that me blathering on and on about these examples makes you understand how vast this problem is. I spent this much time talking about it because it's such a huge problem. The one that personifies the idea that it's better to be dead than disabled is Sam Claflin from Me Before You, 2016. If you were at the protest, yay, because we protested that film, and I think we did pretty good at winning, because we disrupted a Twitter chat with Sam Claflin. He ended up leaving. I have to admit, I was the instigator of that, and I'm very proud of the fact, because I don't feel we were attacking him. We were trying to educate him. We were trying to ask him questions about whether he thought it was okay to play a character where the message was it's better to be dead than disabled, and whether it was okay to partake in disabled mimicry. And I think the fact that it was the first time I ever saw the disability community come together globally, from Australia, the UK, parts of Europe, and the United States. Ever, I've never seen it before personally. It could have happened before, but I wasn't there for it. But it's very exciting to see the global disability community come together and protest the film, and that's what we did on Me Before You. Next slide, please. So the stats on disabled mimicry. As I said before, 95% of disabled television characters are not disabled themselves, or they have not disclosed an invisible disability. Film has similar numbers for exclusion. It has been 30 years since the last disabled actor won a lead actress Oscar. That was Marlee Matlin in 1986 for Children of a Lesser God. 13 of the last 29 winners of the Best Actor Lead Actor category for the Oscars won for disabled mimicry. One man won for a movie where someone else was cripping up. But 13 of 29, that's since Marlee Matlin's year for winning. The last 29 winners, 13 have won for disabled mimicry. No disabled actors have won since then. 8 out of 29 of the winners won the Best Actress Lead Actress Oscar for disabled mimicry. Multiple women won for films where someone else was cripping up. So a lot of those 29 films included disability, and none of those films included actually disabled actors that won the lead actors. So there has not been another Oscar nominee, although Peter Dinklage has won Emmys. We just haven't seen Oscars for disabled people since the 1980s. And I have to say that I was young enough then that I do not remember that happening. And I'm old enough now that I should remember everything that's happening. So next slide, please. So why is mimicry so harmful? I told you a little bit about that while I've been talking about these examples. Representation matters. 20% of the world population is disabled. That's over 1 billion people worldwide. We are a massive group of people. Disabled actors deserve to be given auditions, and they're not. I could see if they're saying, hey, disabled people suck, And I have to believe that there's at least 2 or 3 people out of a billion that could possibly act, but we're not, even seeing 2 or 3 people winning awards, We're seeing very little inclusion. And it all starts with giving disabled actors the opportunity to audition. It needs to start with the casting directors. As I said at the beginning, our battle cry is nothing about us without us. It's harmful if we are not included. It's harmful if it's about us and we're not included. So we need to be included in all aspects of, the creation of media, especially film and television. Another thing is it relies on harmful stereotyping and tropes. I've talked about some of those, the super crip, the pity-inducing, better dead than disabled trope, the evil albino, or the evil little person, or the little person as the fantastical quote-unquote creature like the Hobbit, or the Munchkin, or the Oompa Loompa, the fantasy character, or the trope where disabled people are better off dead than disabled, So we've talked about those, and Mimicry embeds those. Non-disabled actors do not portray disability without stereotyping. Looking at Eddie Redmayne as a great example, everything he did was about how his physical body moved. Every interview he did was, oh, I studied how he sat, and I studied what he looked at, and I studied what little movement he had, and I studied how he looked in photos. It was never, I studied how he felt about being treated as a disabled person. It was always, I studied how he physically was. And that's where we see the stereotyping. They're looking at us on the outside. They're not looking at disabled people as complex individuals, or the disabled identity as a complex identity. Non-disabled people have little experience seeing actually disabled people. I can't tell you how many times I go out in public and non-disabled people walk past me like I don't even exist. I'm told by a lot of non-disabled people that they don't see a lot of disabled people in public. And I know some of that might be true because of the barriers we face in the world. There's a lot of steps, not as many curb cuts as we need. There's transportation issues. Our wheelchairs break down and fall apart. We get trapped at home. Things happen. We get sick, So we might not be out, but there are people out. I see my friends going out. I see their Facebook posting, going to the mall, going to the store, going to the movies, going on a cruise, going on vacation, going with places with their kids. Why don't we see those experiences on film? Because non-disabled creators and non-disabled people, they don't have experience with seeing actual disabled lives being lived. Their exposure to disability is other media. So that also sends the inaccurate message, disabled folks cannot represent themselves. So if we have all these disabled actors, if we have all these non-disabled actors winning awards for their portrayals, what that says is that we need to keep doing this. These films are quote unquote good. They're not good, they're harmful, they're horrible, but nobody's asking the disability community. It's a bunch of non-disabled people awarding other non-disabled people about disability because they all have this wrong idea about disability that is based on media and what media says about us. So the problem is that we're not allowed to represent ourselves because they're awarding these films. They're saying it's okay. It's a free pass to keep doing it over and over and over again. Hang out 1 minute. Give me a drink real quick.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So I just wanted to leave time for questions at the end, Dominic. So maybe in about 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Depictions of disability. Even when disabled actors are included, portrayals can be harmful. We saw that in The Wizard of Oz. The portrayal of little people as these fantastical, giggly, happy, non-nuanced people, that's a really common theme we see. And none better portrayed than The Wizard of Oz. We also saw that with part of Marlee Matlin's winning Oscar performance in Children of a Lesser God. There was this very self-pitying message that, she did not like herself because she was deaf, and she was angry about it. That's a common message we see, the disabled angry person. And yes, that sometimes does happen, but if that's the only message that's getting portrayed about disabled people, other than the other harmful tropes, then people believe that disabled people are angry. I have to tell you, I get told every single day that I'm angry by someone on the internet because I'm fighting for disability rights. I call it being passionate. They call it being angry. I guess we're gonna have to agree to disagree, but that's where that comes from, the idea that disabled people are angry as films like that. Disabled people are not included behind the scenes, especially as storytellers. We need to be telling our stories as disabled people. And non-disabled writers, creators do not understand disabled experiences except from an outsider looking in perspective. They don't. They don't live our lives, so they don't know what disabled lives are like. As I mentioned before, they rely on tropes and stereotypes, and they mostly only allow for the pretty disabled people. There are not a lot of power wheelchair users. I would not be considered a pretty disabled person. I'm okay with that, but come on, let some of us not pretty disabled people have a shot on the screen. Next slide, please. So why are depictions important? Representation matters. People learn how to treat and interact with disabled people based on what they see in the media. It helps others understand disability issues, and it affects everything from how we are treated to what legislation is passed in order to support disability rights. In essence, it affects our lives all the way through. Next slide, please. So the disabled mimicry and depictions, I'm going to show you 2 clips before we get to questions. And one is what I call good portrayals. One is what I call bad portrayals. I'm just going to play them, and then we can talk about what you see.
All right, you're back.
Hello. So I'm wondering, wait, click on them so I can see them again. Right. There you go. I'm wondering what you noticed. I think those are 2 very different clip sets. I picked those clips specifically to have this discussion. I'm wondering what you noticed. Does anybody have any ideas of what they noticed? Anyone? Yeah. Did somebody say something?
Right, so she said it was a realistic versus unrealistic type of portrayal.
It was what?
Realistic versus unrealistic.
Oh, realistic versus unrealistic. Yes, definitely. Anything else stand out? Yep, I see a hand.
Did you hear that, Dominic?
I can't hear what anybody's saying. I can hear you, but no.
Yeah, this is the problem. What I heard was that the negative portrayals were more in pity and more helpless
Yeah,
than the
yes,
positive portrayals.
yes. Did anyone notice that the only portrayals that had non-white people were the good ones? That none of the bad portrayals, because those were films that were overwhelmingly popular, and that there were more men and more, most people were white. None of the bad portrayals had any white people in them. I did that deliberately. And that's because I want to address one more issue. Does anybody else have anything else they noticed?
Well, I'm wondering how you chose the clips, because I guess I saw a few in the positive portrayals that I would have some issues with. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what like, I know it's really hard to find positive, so I guess
Yeah.
it's more like less offensive would be the term that you would use. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked for, with good, my criteria was kind of loose because I don't believe there are many really actually valid good portrayals. These are acceptable good, versus the bad, which are obviously very bad. The criteria was they either had to be an animated film that had a positive portrayal of disability, or had to be a film or TV show that included disabled actors, and the disabled actors were on the screen. Now, Switched at Birth is an interesting example of inclusion. I decided overall to include it. I know some deaf people have a problem with the fact that the lead female character is hard of hearing, but ASL is not her first language, and she also is not deaf, but her character is. She's hard of hearing though, and I believe that we need to listen to that valid argument. But the other character, the drummer in the drumming scenes, is a deaf actor. And I think you can even tell between the signing. He obviously is a much more experienced person who can sign than she is. And it was down to, are the actors disabled themselves in the clips? So it was a very loose selection of what is good, more what is acceptable to what we have now. Because I think we're still at a point for marginalized communities in general where the message is that our portrayals are, like, if we criticized everything, we'd have nothing to watch, because there's so many things that are wrong right now. So I hear constantly from other disabled activists, I kind of have to look past this, because other than this one thing that's not good about disability, the show's amazing, I think that's a very common place to be. So that was my criteria for choosing those clips. And if there's any specific clips you have an issue with, I'd love to share why I chose that clip. So.
Well, for me, what was interesting is that I think when you're talking about disabled actors playing disabled roles, it seems like even then the role is very limited. Dinklage is a good example, although he's done a really good job of choosing his roles very specifically. But still in Elf, the kind of being the little person being beat up by a non-little person is a bit of a trope. I'm surprised to say yes to that. But I can see how, he's a phenomenal actor. And he turned down a lot of roles as he was getting, as he became an actor, I understand.
Yeah.
To get where he was, but.
No, I agree. I agree that he, that role is kind of a ridiculous one. But that one I actually picked because it fit with the music. And I was having trouble getting HBO to work. I would have included one from Game of Thrones, which I think is probably one of his best roles, because I mean, he's able to kind of have this disabled identity that's like, well, our world sucks for disabled people, but I'm gonna make my life kick ass anyway. So I think that that's a much better portrayal, but I was having trouble with HBO, so I ended up with Elf for him. I do like the other film, although he does, spoiler alert, it's older, it's a couple years old. The other film, Knights of Badassdom, I like that film just from the fact that they're cosplayers. They're just like average people, you know? And he's all like dressed up in sorts, because he's cosplaying. He's not like playing an elf or a, you know, a fantastical creature. He's, you know, probably doesn't even know how to use those swords. And, you know, they're just like having this cosplay convention where they go out and pretend they're living in medieval times. And I just thought it was like so kind of realistic to a human being. I know so many disabled people who are involved in geek culture and cosplaying, so that was why I included that clip. But yeah, I agree that Elf is one of those, like, we watch it at Christmas, but I honestly don't, even with the best examples, I can't think of anything that's just so good, because I would say one of the best examples out right now is Speechless. But again, you're looking at a white male role. It has problems, and there's also, it goes between being really great and showing things like inspiration porn, and then going back and calling us special needs, and she's a special needs mom, and you know, focusing on some of the harmful parental messages we see. So even while these portrayals have really great moments, some of them are like, overall, I just don't see anything that isn't created by a disabled person themselves. Now, if we're looking at web-based media, like My Gimpy Life, which was the first clip you saw of the good portrayals, excellent media, relevant, awesome storytelling, great, you know, that's created by Teal Shearer, a disabled actress who, you know, was in another web series with Felicia Day. And so she made this great web series, My Gimpy Life. You know, that is a good portrayal. That actually is good. But I think when you see the bad portrayals and how bad they are, good is it's a very different definition of good, where good becomes acceptable, because I can count on my hand the number of actual good disabled portrayals in media. I cannot count on my hand the horrible ones. There's just that many horrible ones that it really is hard to make a list of good portrayals.
Well, I want to thank you so much. It's been really, really informative the last hour and a bit. I've learned a lot, and I hope everyone has as well. I just wanted to see if anyone had some general questions. Is that okay to do now?
Yeah, can I just talk for about 2 minutes on intersectionality first, because it's really important that I address that. And I miscalculated. I thought I would have a chance for that slide, which was going to come.
We can do a couple minutes, but we have to wrap up.
Okay, no problem. Go to that slide real quick, the intersectionality one. So the reason I wanted to do intersectionality after this is because I wanted you to look at these examples, and I really wanted to hammer home the fact that disabled characters are predominantly white, male, and cisgender. There are huge disparities in the representation of disabled women. I gave you the statistics for that earlier. It's disgusting. But if you add being queer or race or ethnicity to being a disabled woman, it's even worse. LGBTQ characters that are disabled are rare. Those with physical disabilities are even more rare. If we see an LGBTQ character, we generally see them as having a psychiatric or psychosocial disability, and the same is true of trans disabled characters. At one point, being trans and gay were both seen as having psychosocial disabilities. So I think that those are the only roles we really see. There was one film, but it had mimicry recently, called Margarita with a Straw. A disabled woman of color was the lead character, who was a lesbian in the film, well, bisexual. Right? Well, it's kind of not clear. I think she was bisexual. It wasn't really clear where she fell between bisexual and lesbian, but that's a really rare example. And disabled characters are not shown to identify as asexual by choosing to do so, like choosing to say, hey, I'm asexual. It's always just perceived we're non-sexual. Physically disabled Black women and Black trans folks are basically unicorns. They don't exist in most media. Black disabled women, LGBTQA, or trans folks are only usually disabled with a mental health diagnosis. Disabled people of color who are trans are underrepresented significantly. I can't name anyone with a physical disability that I can think of, except for maybe like performance groups like Sins Invalid and things like that. I can't think of anything in like mainstream media where they're included in film. Native disabled characters are usually alcoholics or have mental health disabilities. Again, they're not being physically disabled. Native portrayals are significantly depleted everywhere, but it's even worse for disability. And the more intersections, the less likely you are to be represented. So that's all I have today, and I really hope you enjoyed this discussion. I'd love to hear if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Dominic. Anyone have any questions?
I have a question. Like, what is like relating to the things that are offset and so forth. I wonder what I know a lot of feel that those desexualized portrayals are good amount of people who maybe don't feel like that all the time, but it's definitely valid. That really is like that's a trauma or that was really good and rather than eventually having that
So I think I have to summarize because I don't know if you heard that. Did you hear that? Nate?
I didn't hear any of it.
Okay, so I'll do my best to summarize. Right. So they asked if, you know, all the tropes that we hear about, the better off dead and the sort of internalized ableism that we see in the media, you know, I think some disabled people would argue that those are important things to show because those are valid experiences for disabled people.
Right.
In terms, especially if they're having acquired impairment. And so how do we show it in a way that is positive without sort of, I guess, catering to that sort of idea? How do we do it in a positive way?
Right. Well, I think first, if that's the only message we're seeing, then that's the problem. And right now, that is the main message we're seeing about disability. We're not seeing positive portrayals. We don't have a counterbalance. We could do these, we could see these performances if there was, like, for example, I read the Me Before You book before I saw the horrible movie. It's horrible. The book is worse, but there is this one moment in the book where the woman that's the carer for the man who is a quadriplegic, and she goes and talks to these other quads, and they basically have this attitude that, well, that's life. And they serve as kind of like this counterpoint to the message that he has that my life is over, I need to kill myself, I should be disabled. they removed that and did not include that in the movie. And I said to Jojo Moyes, who's the author of the book and was a part of that creating the movie, I said, why was that omitted? That would have provided a counterpoint. It still would have been a really crappy film, but at least there would have been that counterpoint saying, hey, not everybody feels that way. Some of us are proud of who we are, or we just are. We accept who we are. So having that balance is very important, because right now the only message they're seeing is it's bad, we need to kill ourselves. And that impacts how disabled people are treated. So we're not treated very well because this is the media message and there's nothing to balance it out. So I think that's the first step, is having counter messages, maybe in the same film, having an actual disabled character saying, hey, I feel differently, we're not a monolith. Another is having actually disabled characters, because a lot of these are harmed by non-disabled actors portraying these roles. They're not aware of the problem. So they rely on the tropes and stereotypes of performing disability on top of this already harmful trope of better dead than disabled. So if you have trope on trope, you don't know, you can get rid of the one trope and you can say, well, this is valid, but there's still the other tropes of cripping up, of disabled mimicry, and the problems that presents. So if we're not letting disabled people play these validly as lived experiences, and they're not doing it right, then we have, two tropes on one another, and it's still going to be bad either way. So.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to have to wrap up now, but I really want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you so much for Skyping in with us tonight, Dominic. It's excellent.
If anybody wants to talk to me,
Sorry?
I can stick around if anybody wants to come up and talk.
Okay, yeah, we'll just kind of close the draw. I think Shelby's going to come up, and did you get any raffle? Yeah.
Okay.
Also grab food if you want. Please eat. There's lots left over.
All right, I'm going to keep you on the screen for a few minutes while we wrap up, Dominic.
Okay.